Hello and welcome to the Blockade Runner podcast number 260, which exists in a temporal plane that in which time neither passes or it speeds up, it slows down, it's always in motion or something. And my name is John, and joining me this morning is Ryan. What's up, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, am I even really here? Who is to say? We will finish this episode and it will feel like an hour or whatever, and people will be like, "You're done recording? You just went in there."
Yeah. Yeah, and also you're wearing like a sweet and Justice for All t-shirt with no sleeves on it, and it's like it could be 2024, it could be like 1988, like nobody knows.
It's true. It's true. Yep.
Yeah, so we this morning we are here to revisit the Mortis arc from Star Wars: The Clone Wars. We have, I feel like, talked a little bit of shit here and there about this arc in the past. Just like I don't know, we've been doing this podcast for a long time, and I feel like whenever it has come up, we have been less than generous in our discussion of it. So I thought, Ryan, especially with its seemingly increased importance to the larger Star Wars story, that we should go back and watch it and take another look at it years later and see what we thought, and just talk a little bit about this trilogy of episodes from Star Wars: The Clone Wars. So we've both done that now, and we're going to talk about it. And what I love about this, Ryan, is that we have not at all discussed how either of us feel about these episodes on rewatch. So,
Nope.
we're just going to see what do we think here as we jump into them. So we watched all three. We took notes on all three. We're going to kind of talk about all of them, or we're going to talk about each of them individually, I should say. But maybe we should start out by, at least addressing a little bit the big question here. How did we feel about these three episodes of Star Wars: The Clone Wars years later? Would you like to start, Ryan?
Sure. I feel about the same as I did before. I I I don't know. I feel like I understand the episodes better, and then I looked at like, oh, how does this show up in Rebels? Like, and then obviously I think we'll probably talk at the end about how it shows up in Ahsoka. But as we're kind of going through the episodes, I think I'll be able to talk about some of my pretty major issues I have with all this. I did think like the episodes are like pretty watchable. They're not like painful or like badly done or anything. I think just like the plot and you know repercussions in general just don't sit well with me. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I probably overall agree with that for the most part. I mean, like you said, the episodes are watchable and like well done. I agree. I think they are well produced, and they're good episodes. I think at the time that I first watched them, which by the way would have been 2011, is when these episodes first aired. So we're coming up on 15 years almost since these episodes first aired. When I first watched them, I think they really threw me for a loop, right? Like I was like, what is this? This is not like, this does not feel like Star Wars to me. This is wild. And in 2024, I'm a little more used to this type of Star Wars, so I think I probably am less put off by them than I was initially. You know what I mean? So I'm able, and that was part of why I wanted to rewatch them, is I thought, it's been so long, and we've been through a lot like since then, in terms of there's been a lot of Star Wars, content out there. So I don't know, not I shouldn't say we've been through a lot. I've enjoyed a lot. Like there's been a lot of great stuff, but some of it has stretched and and challenged and kind of expanded, how
Hmm.
I personally view Star Wars. And so as a result, I think I'm a little more open to these episodes than I had been. But all that being said, they're still not my favorites. So I still have issues with them, and I still have, like you said, issues maybe with their larger implications for the storytelling in general.
So something arguably competing visions of what Star Wars is. And I think that's true in like, the creators, but also like what fans gravitate to or have strong feelings about one way or another. Like, you've got on one hand, you've got like Ahsoka, which you know, is very much tied into all of this. And then on the other hand, you have like Andor. And I think we're just in this era. I mean, Star Wars has always had many creators, but that was mostly in like the George era. That was mostly like EU stuff, which was like, you know, it counts as much as you want it to count. George doesn't actually think it counts unless there's something he wants to take from it. But now, like, we're in this era where, like, yes, this is everything is equal, everything's the same, everything's canon, whatever. Like, you know, Tales of the Jedi is, the same as in importance as Andor, and these are both Star Wars, and I think like we and people are like, yeah, actually, maybe not. Like maybe like this thing is more Star Wars, this thing is less Star Wars, um, whatever. So all that being said, like this is just interesting because we are kind of back to the era of like, Clone Wars was very much George's thing, and also, Dave Filoni's thing. Um, and I I wasn't really able to find much about this, but do you know, was the Mortis thing a George idea?
Yeah, see, I was trying to find that too,
Okay.
and yeah, I didn't find a lot. I wish that I didn't have time to like dig into like some really old Star Wars insiders or try to see
Mm-hmm.
if there was something,
Same.
in places like that. I tried to find them online, but I didn't find anything. But I feel like maybe, you know, but I found a featurette that's on um, the Clone Wars Blu-ray that
Mm.
addresses this stuff a little bit. It's only like 2 minutes long, and it's just Dave Filoni talking. But
Mm-hmm.
there were a few things he said. Uh, I think it does come from George, or that George is pretty involved in it. One thing he said is that Christian Taylor wrote this trilogy of episodes. By the way, he was the writer,
Mm.
and Dave Filoni was the supervising director, and there was Stuart Lee and Brian Kalin O'Connell were the directors of the episodes, which we could get into them. But anyway, Dave says something along the lines of Christian Taylor and I believe any word dealing directly with the Force has to come directly from George.
Mm.
And then Dave also talked about a lot of the ideas related to these episodes coming from like this old binder of ideas that George had about the Force.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so those two things combined, as well as the fact that yes, George was still at Lucasfilm, heavily involved with the Clone Wars throughout its production. I think he was all the way through, but this is only season 3, so this is, right in the middle of the run.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I couldn't find anything super concrete that said George Lucas was like, sat us down and was like, Mortis, 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 here's the deal, the father, the son, the daughter, all that. But
Mm-hmm.
certainly he more than signed off on it. I mean, he was very involved, and in that featurette, Dave really makes it sound like, especially when it's stuff related to this like high concept Force type stuff, like
Mm-hmm.
that's all coming from George, or we are like super running it by George or whatever, you know what I mean? So, That's the best I've found so far in terms of George's direct involvement, but it certainly sounds like, he was on board at the minimum, but that they maybe were pulling straight from, some G level canon binders
Mm,
and
mm.
conversations. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah. Um, One more thing I'll bring up from that featurette, and I'll probably drop the audio into the episode too. But one more thing I'll bring up from that is that Dave talks about the ambiguous nature of these episodes in that featurette as well, and says that the purpose of this arc is to challenge expectations, ask questions, and that if you were to answer the questions that people have about this arc. I'm looking at your face, Ryan, right now as I'm saying this.
Yeah.
If you were to
Can't
answer,
pause.
if you, if he were to answer questions about this arc, he would be robbing the audience of the purpose of this arc, this Mortis arc. So it's about asking the questions and about challenging expectations and that kind of thing. So obviously it's intentionally ambiguous, but he also does point out that they will continue to explore Mortis in future. He says like in more Clone Wars episodes, but obviously
Hmm.
we've seen now that really it's like in Rebels and in Ahsoka and
Hmm.
like I feel like it's obviously like very directly connected to like the world between worlds and all that. So it's
Hmm.
sort of like this this very fantasy feeling, version of Star Wars that has been, it's like a thread that's continued through, future animated shows and then even into the live action shows and kind of in the Rise of Skywalker too. So it's all over the place.
Yeah, I think I take some issue with calling this ambiguous,
Okay.
because
Well,
to
that's
m-
my word. I will say
yeah,
that was my word. He didn't say that,
okay.
but
Okay. Because to me this feel like these I think one of my major issues with these is they feel overly literal, like
no, I
extremely
agree.
literal. Um and with everything from like the um the force personification of the families to the whole Anakin chosen one thing. Like I think you're taking ambiguous concepts and like being very literal with them, and I think that's
Yes.
only continued in like the subsequent media that they've shown up in.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. I think he was talking about like, is that really Qui-Gon Jinn or is that not really Qui-Gon Jinn? Like stuff like that, which I do think
Yeah.
stays pretty ambiguous, but no, I agree with you that there were moments where I was like, wow, we're gonna be that on the nose about it, or we're literally just gonna
Yeah.
say like flat out like this is the answer. Um, and sometimes I didn't really like the answer that much, so yeah, I'm with you there. I get what you mean.
All right. Should
Um,
we just dive into the episodes now?
I think we should. I think we should talk about the
Yeah.
first of the three, which is episode 15 from season 3. It is titled Overlords, but our
Mm.
buddy Dave in Japan hooked us up with the Japanese titles,
Mm.
which he kind of said set up the episodes a little better, and I agree. So the Japanese title of this first episode is Force Planet, which is a solid title as well, maybe a little better, at least a little more straightforward than
Mm.
Overlords as a title there. And like I said before, it was directed by Stuart Lee, and all three of these episodes were written by Christian Taylor. So yeah, let's jump in. Actually, Ryan, if you don't mind, I have the synopsises. What's the plural of synopsis? Synopses.
Synopsi?
Pulled up. Synopsis. Yeah, I have the official descriptions pulled up, so I'm just going to read those real quick, so then we don't
Hmm.
have to like worry about trying to explain what happens in the episode, and we can just
Sure.
talk the important points. So, the official description of Ghosts of Mortis reads: The Jedi remain stranded on Mortis, and the Sun aligned. Whoops, wrong episode. Got to go back.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay, man. Uh, okay. A mysterious force draws Anakin this is Overlords, which is the episode we're talking about, right? A mysterious force draws Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka to a distant planet and its inhabitants, a family of exceptionally powerful force wielders, in an attempt to determine whether Anakin is truly the chosen one. The patriarch of this family, known only as the Father, has spent ages maintaining the balance between his daughter, who is strong with the light side of the Force, and his son, who aligns with the dark. The Father reveals his days are numbered, and he seeks Anakin to take his place as the fulcrum of the balance. A test proves that Anakin is capable of controlling both offspring, as the Father does, but Skywalker refuses to take the Father's place. Okay, so there's our description of the episode. Yeah, like it states in that description, it opens up with them getting pulled into Mortis. I guess it looks like a floating Hellraiser cube. I thought we can call that cube from Hellraiser, the puzzle box or whatever, right?
Yeah,
it kind of looked like that. So that was odd. It's like this big structure, like floating out there in space. It's not like a planet that they are popping into there. But anyway, they get pulled into that, and they're sort of like passed out when they wake up. And they first run into the daughter, who tells them, "We are the ones that guard the power," which I assume means the Force, right? The beginning, the middle, and the end. So they're already like in this first episode, and actually it's mostly in the first episode, I think they talk about time as like a concept. The Father says it was necessary to withdraw from the temporal world. So I guess, like, I don't know, time, there's no time on Mortis, or it certainly doesn't operate the same way there as it does elsewhere. So
yeah, because they are like ancient beings, which I think is an important thing to note.
yeah,
Like,
ancient beings, but the father's getting too old and is going to die, though, also, right?
Yes, it's yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Yeah. So, but the time thing is interesting because it's like they'll wake up. Like, in fact, I think the suggestion at the end of the arc, at the end of the 3 episodes, is like they wake up from all this and barely any time has passed, right? Like they were just on their ship the whole time, sort of. Or, yeah, it's a mystical thing, but time doesn't exist, or at least it doesn't operate the same way there on Mortis, which I think would be true of the world between worlds too, really, kind of, right? So it's another link to that.
Yeah, because I think I haven't rewatched Rebels since it was on, so I don't exactly remember how it's handled there. But in Ahsoka, it's like all the stuff that she does in the world between worlds is like an instant in the regular time.
Right, and you can just walk from one light bridge to another and go to like any time, right? Like, take a left and it's, Return of the Jedi, take a right and it's The Last Jedi, right? I mean, isn't that kind of like
it's like
how it
like
operates
a
up
Lego
there?
Star Wars game.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, anyway, the temporal thing, the time thing is a new idea here. I don't remember any other Star Wars stories before this Mortis arc suggesting there was a realm within Star Wars of the Force where, time didn't exist or didn't exist the way we understand it.
I mean, I think like the closest thing I think in Star Wars to all of this stuff, which I imagine is probably the root, no pun intended, is the tree on Dagobah. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the only thing I can think of that predates this that would have some like weird, unreality, maybe some time stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, that's certainly very mystical. I think, that is more, well, I don't know. I think I always thought of that as just like a place that's like strong in the Force and delivers visions or whatever, so you're seeing visions there. But I guess you could argue to a certain extent it's almost like a possible vision of the future, so to speak. So yeah, it's just a little less heady, right? Like a little less high concept, I guess, that Dagobah tree. But yeah, I mean that's only the second Star Wars movie. It's 1980, and George is already, you know, dipping his toes into the mystical side of things in a more kind of, I don't know if concrete is the right word, but in a more realized way. So
Yeah,
he's
I
been
mean,
into it all along.
yeah, and that is like a scene I would call like ambiguous with like the
Yeah,
dialogue around it, like everything. Like they just kind of like they leave it there and like no one is explaining it, and then
yeah,
Yoda doesn't break down all the time and the meaning and everything there.
yeah, yeah. Well, jump in any ideas you want to throw out here, Ryan, as we're breaking down the episode. The next thing I have is that the brother looks a hell of a lot like the Grand Inquisitor.
Yeah.
Um, he looks like a Powin,
Mm-hmm.
which is what the Grand Inquisitor is, and I feel like even the marks above his eyes and stuff, like all that,
Mm-hmm.
like seems. So I don't know if he's supposed to be a Powin, from Utapau or what, but he looks so much like the Grand Inquisitor, who of course had not been created yet. So it makes you wonder if and maybe Dave has talked about this, I don't know, but if the Grand Inquisitor was created in the image of the brother.
Oh boy. They like the
Oh
whole
boy.
family seems to be like different races,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is, I mean, I don't know. That,
Well, it
and
wouldn't be.
I wonder, like, I don't actually wonder. I do not need this explained to me. Like, please don't. If you're listening, Lucasfilm, you don't need to tell me who the mother is.
Yeah,
Like, I do not. We do not need that. But it is like, it is curious. Like,
I bet
'cause I
it's
feel like
Ray.
this.
Do you think it's Ray? I bet
Oh
it's
my
Ray.
god, it's Palpatine. I. But like, so like, where this stuff, like everything in here just works so much better for me, like as a metaphor.
Yeah,
And then like all of these like little nitpicks and stuff like don't actually matter.
yeah.
And but that's the problem with this episode. I think it's the nature of the medium that they were using here, where this is like a television show for like 8-year-olds, um and that they're trying to do this like heady 3-part arc, which you know typically doesn't exist in much children's television. Like obviously there's things that came before that did multi-part arcs, like X-Men animated series, Batman animated series and stuff, but um you know, it feels like the ideas here are like constantly like butting heads with the medium, because I think this story could have probably been told in a more satisfying way in like an adult novel, or in modern times. Like it could still be an animated series on Disney Plus, but like the audience is different than it was in 2011 when this was on Fox Kids or whatever. Whatever Clone Wars aired on. I don't even remember at this point.
Yeah, it was not Fox Kids. I know. Yeah. Oh my God. Cartoon Network. Wasn't it Cartoon
Cartoon
Network?
Network. Okay.
I think it was Cartoon Network. Yeah.
So
Um, yeah, you're right. But although I think that it's like what you're describing is a problem to the least degree in this episode, I think, of the three.
mhm.
To me, it's like this one is the least defined, because like if I just watched this episode on its own, I feel like at the end of it I could be like, well, I don't know, was that real or not, and when like Obi-Wan sees Qui-Gon, Anakin sees Shmi, Ahsoka sees her older self, And like when Obi-Wan was talking to Qui-Gon, I was like, oh yeah, that's not Qui-Gon. And then Shmi even gets all like, doesn't Shmi turn into the sun at the end of the vision that Anakin has of her or something? Like, so it's like, to me, it's like, oh yeah, okay, so
Yeah.
this is like not real. You know what I mean? This is like, these are visions, like this place where they are. It's like, I don't know, like, I don't know how to explain it. It's mystical, but it's like a weird dream state that they're in. They're all on that ship knocked out, and
Mm.
it's like a weird dream state or something, and that's it. But obviously, like, by the time you get to the end of the 3 episodes, and then of course, by the time you get to 15 more years of Star Wars storytelling, it's like, no, we're really tripling down on this being
Hmm.
a thing that I feel like, anyways, a thing that they actually experienced, and a place that actually has a lot of importance and power in Star Wars. So, in 2011, I think you could have walked away from this episode for sure, and even the arc overall, and been like, I don't know, maybe it didn't even happen, but that feels harder to do as time goes on.
Yeah, and now actually, like, I feel like I need to be clear here. I don't mean that this ep- this whole thing. I feel like they were trying to do a lot in the restraints of the medium. I think actually, like what you described, I think you can actually have an episode of like a kids TV show watched by kids and have it be kind of ambiguous. Like honestly, like most of the over explaining that happens in Star Wars is to appease like 45-year-old men. Like who
Yeah,
argue in YouTube comment sections about like a bunch of like literal crap that doesn't matter. Um, so yeah, I I think I wish they would have actually leaned more into the ambiguous part of it,
right.
because then I think it would be like un like kind of like a non-issue, really.
Yeah. But do you agree with me though that like as time goes on, I don't know if retroactively is the right word, but like as more stories are told, they
Hmm.
impact like how we view this story and whether or not we can sort of view it ambiguously. Like I think the more
Right.
times Dave Filoni sticks the world between worlds and Mortis
Hmm.
God statues and stuff into future storytelling, the less I can be like, oh, well, this is like a weird fever dream arc of Clone Wars, and so it's
Exactly.
whatever. Like, no, now this shit is like all over the place, and so I can't really be like, who knows? Maybe it didn't really even like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, because I think like this could have been like sunny day in the void, or
Yeah,
that sort of thing.
yeah,
And like no one's like arguing or debating about like the canon and like repercussions of like that episode, or I mean actually people probably are. It's probably a very heated discussion happening somewhere for the last like 15 years, um but you're right, like the way it keeps coming back, and I think that's what's hard sometimes about modern Star Wars storytelling is, again, it does feel like competing visions. And, there's the story group to help tie everything together, but if you just followed Star Wars through like a Dave Filoni lens, like this, and only like followed the stuff that he made, like this would seem incredibly important. It's like this is possibly the origin of the Force. This is everything, and it's obviously important because we keep coming back to it every 5 to 10 years. Like we're still talking about this because it's super important. And then in the meantime, like no one else who's making Star Wars stuff is like referencing any of this or like
yeah.
acknowledging any of this. Like Tony Gilroy does not give a shit about the world between worlds. Like it's
Well, or
it's
even
not coming up in any other place, but it's like this thing that has like all this weight in the context of like these stories. So it
yeah,
feels kind of weird.
Yeah, yeah. Even somebody like Ryan Johnson, who I think like has a ton of respect for Dave Filoni
Hmm.
and really appreciates like the stuff he does and everything. Like, I don't think he was thinking about this at all when he was making, The Last Jedi, which is not even like there's no value judgment in that at all. Like, oh, he's
Hmm.
he didn't care about it, so he wasn't. And it's just like they're just operating in different worlds, right? Like,
Hmm.
it's just a totally different thing. It's like Hayden Christensen, when he came back to be in Ahsoka, was like, oh, I had never watched the Clone Wars, so I went back and watched all the Clone Wars, and he really appreciated like Anakin's arc and his portrayal and all that in the Clone
Hmm.
Wars. But yeah, not everyone is like consuming all this Star Wars stuff, and um, there's maybe not so much a hierarchy of importance or like canon anymore, where it's like, oh, the movies are canon and the other stuff is like less canon. I mean, when,
Hmm.
TV shows and movies and all that stuff, it's like it all has its place and it's all canon and it's all important or whatever. But there's still millions and millions of people that will just watch Star Wars movies and they'll just know Star Wars as a series of movies, and then that's like what it'll be. And this stuff doesn't exist for them.
Hmm.
But then there's going to be a lot of people now who watch the Disney Plus TV shows, and this stuff is getting pulled into that, but they'll still never go back and watch this, so it doesn't exist to them either. So it's just like,
Hmm.
I don't know. Yeah, it's just interesting to think about how Star Wars is so big and so expansive now that uh there are storytellers, as you said, that are telling Star Wars stories that really don't in a major way take into consideration entire other types of Star Wars stories that
Hmm.
to a lot of us as an audience are critical, parts of that
Hmm.
tapestry of that big story. But, you're going to have people come in that are making a Star Wars movie that have never watched this arc and don't really know what it means. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And that will continue to happen in the future. So it's an interesting thing to wrestle with as an audience member and a fan, who's trying to process all this stuff, because it's like it's not just one guy anymore, like you said. You know what I mean? So,
Hmm.
and that doesn't make. I'm not saying that makes this like less important or whatever. It's just reality, and it's just an
Yep.
interesting thing and a complex thing to kind of tackle or try to deal with.
Yeah.
So.
And I think, like the from my understanding, like the story group is not there to guide Star Wars stories through the years, and they don't have like a grand vision for where Star Wars is going. It's individual creators who are like pitching, their stories, or maybe um maybe Lucasfilm is reaching out to people and being like, hey, we were thinking about a story around this. Like, do you have an idea? Kind of thing. Like, we think you'd be good for this, etc. Um, but I think, like, really, they are just there to make sure that the stories don't, like, overtly contradict each other, which I think, in this, what, like, I guess, like 10 years that we've, you know, been in this Disney era, um, I think they've done a pretty good job of that. Like, I can't think of
Mhm.
too many like super egregious contradictions, especially compared to growing up in like the '90s and with like EU
Oh yeah.
stuff, and even like early 2000s and everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, just one more point on that whole topic of different like creators, and what they've seen and haven't seen and all that. I came across a comment from Dave Filoni a couple days or weeks ago, I can't remember, about Rise of Skywalker and Ahsoka being in it, because like Ahsoka, like it would imply she's dead, right? And we don't know the end of Ahsoka's story or whatever. And the comment from Dave was something like, well, yeah, like he didn't ask me if she should be a voice. Like nobody asked or anything, right? It's just like she's just in it, which I think in, the intention there is like, we want to really bring in characters from all different parts of the story. You know what I mean? I don't think it was in any way like oh, we don't give a shit what Dave thinks. We're just going to stick her in there anyway.
Hmm.
I think it was more like, there is this cast of voice actors and this cast of characters that's been a big part of Star Wars, and like it'll be cool for fans to bring in all these different, kind of characters and voices and stuff. But it just is another example of, well, I don't know. I guess it is and it isn't, because it's like
Hmm.
we're not even talking to Dave about whether she should be a voice at the end of the story or not.
That is
But also,
wild
I know
to
who she
me.
is. I know who she is,
Yeah,
at least, So if you're JJ, so I don't
that
know.
is that is wild. Like you'd think that like there could have at least been like an email. Like
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, and I bet he talked to Pablo about it though, or something. You know what I mean? I bet he talked to somebody, or like somebody was involved
Yeah.
in, you know. And I think I would assume the idea is like it doesn't, because we have this whole world between worlds. Like, what does it really mean that we hear Ahsoka's voice? Like, does she
Yeah.
even is she even constrained by time anymore at this point? I mean, we don't know where she's going to end up, but it sure seems like it'll be something to do with Mortis and the world between worlds, right?
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, I guess
But
like before like that wasn't really an issue until we have this like Ahsoka show
right,
that is starting to bump up against the sequel trilogy. So at
yeah,
some point, I mean, there's gonna have to be some sort of answer probably of
oh yeah, yeah,
her fate.
sure, yep.
Hmm.
The only other kind of like major, I guess, two other things I had on this episode, are that I feel like a lot of it was just interesting to watch it now, because a lot of the visual language of Mortis I see reflected in other things that have come after, and I wonder how much this is a reference point that the creators of, like, say, Rebels, and which is Dave obviously, but like
Yeah.
Rebels and Ahsoka and stuff, go back to this and pull from it, and then also how much this pulled from other things. So like one example is that I thought the temple or whatever it is, the monastery, looked a lot like Vader's castle. Um, and I was like, huh, that's really interesting. But then I know like there were like Macquarie designs and stuff for Vader's castle. So it's like,
Mm.
was that influenced by designs for Vader's castle when they were making Vader's castle later on? Because that would have been after this for sure, like in the Disney era. Did Was there some thought of like, well, you know what I mean, to go back to this and pull, you know what I'm
Mm.
saying? That kind of stuff. So, um, yeah, just little moments like that. But there's a lot of design language and yeah, art design that kind of I see similarities in a lot of what's come after. But then also wonder where the inspiration for that stuff even came from initially for this episode. Like, where did they pull it from?
Mhm. Yeah.
So yeah. And then I guess the one other thing too that I had on this one is that the major kind of question being asked throughout the episode, and I think a big, obviously important topic, is Anakin the chosen one?
Mhm.
That's like a thread running through here, and sort of a Anakin's says that the prophecy is not true, it's not real or whatever, and the father's like, oh, you're definitely the chosen one. And anyway, it's just a big question kind of hanging over the episode, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And as to like what that actually means in the context of like Mortis is the father is like you are the chosen one, or if you are the chosen one, you have to remain here to keep my children in balance. Dying, whatever. And then it's like, leave and your choice will haunt you in the galaxy. So it is like this, which is kind of like one of like the things that just doesn't land for me about this whole arc is this, idea of what is happening on this planet that we're just, just being introduced to in this like three-part, cartoon, is like this planet represents everything that's happening to the galaxy. Like And in I think it's maybe the next episode they talk about like, well, the sun is getting stronger and he's, in the dark side. So that means the Sith are getting stronger in the whole galaxy. And um and like, everything that's happening here is representative of everything that's happening everywhere in the galaxy with the Force, which I don't know, maybe that's just like it I don't know if it's too high concept for me or if it's just a concept I don't think like works.
Yeah,
But yeah, that stuff
yeah.
just like really doesn't land for me. It's like hard to actually feel or accept the stakes that are being presented here.
I agree, and I also feel like the resolution of those stakes by the end of this arc undermines them being all that important in the first place, which is a major
Mm-hmm.
issue I have with all of
Yep,
it. But we can talk about that when we get to
we'll
it.
get
Yeah,
there. Yeah.
yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about the next episode, which is Altar of Mortis, or the Japanese title is Light and Dark. Light and Dark, yeah. So the description of
Hmm.
this episode reads: Before the Jedi can leave Mortis, the Son takes Ahsoka captive in an attempt to entice Anakin into joining him to use their combined strength to overpower his father and sister. To this end, the Son casts Ahsoka under the spell of the dark side. Meanwhile, the father attempts to stave off a disastrous showdown between his children and maintain the Force's increasingly precarious balance on the planet. Fearing that the son may be unstoppable, the daughter does the forbidden by taking Obi-Wan Kenobi to the Altar of Mortis, wherein is kept the Dagger of Mortis, a weapon capable of killing a Force wielder. The son steals this weapon and attempts to use it against his father to steal his power and end his rule, but the daughter sacrifices herself, placing herself in front of the blade. So I guess when it says capable of killing a Force wielder, it means killing one of these Mortis gods or whatever, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
as far as I know, like lots of different blades can, or weapons or whatever can,
Yeah.
like Force wielders can die of natural causes, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They can die of
They can
getting
get
cut
shot
with a
by a clone
lightsaber.
trooper.
They could, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I guess that specifically means these three: the father, the son, and the daughter. Um, so yeah, that's the description. I think watching this as a cartoon on Cartoon Network as an episode of the third season of the Clone Wars, it's a pretty cool idea to see the Evil Dead Deadite version of Ahsoka. Like
Mm-hmm.
all consumed by the dark side, and I think that was pretty fun and pretty cool to get the creepy possessed version of Ahsoka. Um, and certainly there's some drama. It's compelling, the brother turning on his own father, and
Mm-hmm.
and attempting to kill him too. So, um, yeah, this episode definitely has some cool moments and some cool concepts for sure.
Yeah, there's a few just kind of like fun, inconsequential things that I like about this episode. First of all, the um always a fan of the Clone Wars announcer at the
Yeah,
beginning of the episodes, the old
mystery on
timey.
Mortis. Yeah,
Yep, because Mystery on
not a good
Mortis is just
impersonation, but
great. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I like those. When the daughter leads Obi-Wan to that the altar, um it is like it looks straight up like a World of Warcraft dungeon from like 2009, which is pretty great. Lots of just like weird glowy green stuff and happening around it.
Yeah.
um it's ridiculous when the son is like he actually says the words, everything has transpired exactly as I planned. just
Oh,
just like
yeah.
incredibly lame. um Wait, is this the first episode where the
I
or
don't
did that
think
happen
so,
in
but
the
I do like
previous
that. I
episode?
like that a lot. I think he did do it in the previous episode. It
Okay.
definitely does it in the third also, but yeah, I think that's pretty cool.
Probably worth mentioning. That the brother can turn into a giant bat. He can just,
Yeah, yeah.
Dracula his way out of there. But then
A
the
little bit of
daughter.
a little bit of gothic horror and sort of Dracula
Mm,
infused Star Wars before we got the Tales of Vader's Castle comics years later.
yeah,
You know.
yeah. But then the daughter turns into like a griffin. Like
Yeah.
what is like
Well, because bats are dark side and griffins are light side, right? That's obvious.
okay. Yeah. Um I mean, again, please do not explain to me the origins of these transformations. Like, I do not need to know
Yeah.
about witches of Dathomir or whatever, like,
Yeah.
evoking whatever. Like, I don't need this, like, Harry
Yeah.
Potter bullshit, like, in Star Wars any more than it already is.
Yeah.
So, um, but
Well, real quick on the
yeah.
concept of or on the topic of the daughter, I do want to say I appreciate most things about this arc and these episodes, even if they're not my favorite, but I do appreciate a lot of it. I don't at all enjoy the design of the daughter, like the character, the
Mm,
look of it. It's so like her hair is enormous. Like no one's hair has that much volume, and
mm,
just like the look of the dress she wears and everything. It's just so, and she kind of glides around like a I don't know like what, but I just don't really like
mm.
it very much. I don't think it's a very Star Wars feeling design for a character.
Yeah, yeah. And,
I know you loved it,
neither
but I'm just
neither
saying
is
it's
her.
not my favorite design.
Neither is her turning into a griffin. Is also not.
I'm more okay with that. I like that much more than the actual look of the character. I'll just say, but
Yeah.
yeah,
You know, it is what it is, but it's worth mentioning because there is a part where they actually fight. Like, it's a bat versus a griffin
yeah,
in battle. Yeah. Yep. That's the
hmm.
thing that happens.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So I don't know. That's let's see. Well, there's also the whole situation at the end where like the daughter has kind of she's put her body between her brother's blade and the father and sacrificed herself,
Hmm.
and she's laying there, and then there's like this whole thing where like Anakin just like walks in front of the father and kneels in front of him, and they both like kind of mirror each other's movements, and then Anakin like puts a hand on each, like on the daughter and the father, or the daughter and the brother. Anyway, he like acts as like a conduit, you know. Oh, it's
No, it's
Ahsoka. Actually,
to
that's what it is.
Ahsoka. Yeah.
To Ahsoka to undo the possession or whatever. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I was just like, wow, that was. I mean, it's not a big deal. It's a cartoon, whatever. But I was just like, wow, that was really interesting. How he like silently, without any verbal communication, just knew like, okay, I should assume the position on my knees here between these two and place my
Mm-hmm.
hands there and just do this thing, like to transfer, whatever it was. I thought that was a little bit. I didn't understand how he knew what he was doing there, but I guess he is the chosen one, so that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but also, I did think too, like I kind of liked it, the daughter, making that sacrifice, and then right after that, like him sort of using her energy in her dying moments to cure Ahsoka. It was, I know, I have a tendency to bring this up, but like it really comes back to like, or I guess flashes forward to Rise of
Rise of
Skywalker and the
Skywalker.
whole
Yep.
like, yeah, like self-sacrifice and
Mm-hmm.
up giving of one's like force or life or energy or whatever in a selfless way to someone else. So I kind of like it the way it's done a little better in the Rise of Skywalker, but still I think like, you know, that's it's very in line with, I think, the values and like the ideas of Star Wars. So as much as I thought it was a little goofy the way he went over there and kneeled and like immediately like, and they both like kind of go like this, and their eyes roll back in their head and everything, like, you know what I mean? It was a little corny, but end of the day, Christian Taylor, who wrote these episodes, I'm like, okay, well that does fit in with like George's vision of like the kind of morality of Star Wars and stuff.
Yeah, I don't like it in any case. I don't like the energy, the life transferring magic, siphoning
Yeah,
stuff in general. Like I feel like you can you can have like Star Wars has been fine with having sacrifice without being like so literal about it.
yeah,
Like um but yeah, but I mean, you're right. Like it does, I guess, set the precedent for that in a sort of. This is like a
yeah.
different scenario than like the Ben Solo stuff and this
Yeah, I
the
just mean it
worm,
more as like a
whatever.
motif or like an idea that's
Yeah.
not like, oh, well, this proves that. I don't mean so much like, well, see,
Like
if you don't like it in Rise of Skywalker, this proves that actually it is a power that Jedi can do. I just more mean
yes.
like it's an idea that's important in Star Wars, that it's like it's good to give of oneself, to be selfless
Mhm.
and to be willing to sacrifice for others. You know what I mean? That's like a motif that like certainly I think we see in less literal or obvious ways, like you were saying about the Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
It's very on the nose there.
Yeah.
You see it throughout Star Wars all the time in more subtle ways, I
Mhm.
guess.
Yeah.
This is a pretty like intense version of it. In Rise of Skywalker, it's a pretty intense version of
Mhm.
it. But I just kind of appreciated the similarity there,
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, like
So
regardless of execution, thematically
yeah.
it's on point. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Um. So yeah, like, should we move on to the final episode here, Ghosts of Mortis?
Give some Mortis.
All right, and Ghosts of Mortis, this one, directed by Stuart Lee again. I don't think I gave credit to the director Brian Kalin O'Connell of the last one, but this third episode, Ghosts of Mortis, which is called Future Choice in Japanese. Ghosts of Mortis, the Jedi remain stranded on Mortis, and the Sun, aligned with the dark side of the Force, renews his efforts to convert Anakin as the Jedi prepare for a decisive confrontation. Anakin is stunned by images of his dark future. The Sun promises him the power to avert his destiny. The father recognizes that the son has broken the rules of time. He wipes Anakin's memory of these future visions and steals the Mortis dagger to end the conflict. The father impales himself, thus preventing the son from stealing his power. The son, stunned by this, is run through by Anakin. With all three Force wielders destroyed, the imbalance in the Force disappears on Mortis. The three Jedi are transplanted back to the galaxy proper, apparently at the moment that they disappeared. All right. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think the big things in this episode are, to start for sure, it's the vision that the son shows to Anakin of his future, right? They're in like a lava area of Mortis. It's very
Mustafaria.
yeah, very Mustafarian. Yeah. And so that I think was intentional and makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then the vision he sees is quite literal, and as I was watching it, I don't know if literal is the right word, but as I was watching it, it's very specific. As I was watching it today, because I watched it this morning, I was thinking like, all right, going into it, like, all right, well, I was feeling like if this was me, I would make it a sort of vague suggestion of what his future might be like, and I was thinking like, I hope they don't like have lines from, Revenge of the Sith, and
Yep.
nope, they did it all. You know what I mean? You
Yeah.
see Padme, you see Obi-Wan there, you see him getting ready to kill a youngling, like it's all there. Even so far as like at
Giant
the end of it,
Vader
there's
helmet.
a Vader helmet above him. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
I think I would preferred a little more subtlety or a little more restraint in that vision.
Mm-hmm.
But, I will say too, like, let's be fair. This is 2011 and on a cartoon made for children. And
Yes.
maybe it's good to kind of make evident to the audience what, he stands to he stands to be corrupted to do, or whatever you want to say, like in the end, right? So I can see it from that perspective, but it was maybe a tad much for me in terms of showing exactly what was going to happen, and it does make me think too, like, well, wait a minute, and I guess like it's a pretty obvious answer, temporal, whatever, like the rules of time don't exist in Mortis, so yeah, it's already happened, I guess, or whatever. So the son can show him that, but you know, something I'm wrestling with, at least initially while watching it, is like, well, this hasn't happened yet. So how can you have it? How can I see like what Anakin says in that moment, or what Anakin does in that moment? Like I saw it in Revenge of the Sith, but like that hasn't happened yet. So he shouldn't be able to show him that. But that's just because I'm thinking of time too conservatively. The father agrees. Well, the father agrees he shouldn't have done it. He should not have done it. Yeah. Apparently that's a big no-no on Mortis. Like one of the major rules is like no future stuff. Okay. That's against the rules on Mortis.
Yeah. And I feel like this is the episode where, I mean, like, I don't want to be like plot hole, excuse me, YouTube dipshit, but like, I mean, everything just kind of falls apart here, because if like it's not even like ooh, I'm so clever, I identified this thing. It's like, if you think about like literally anything that happens in this episode for more than 2 seconds, it's like either like, how would that work, or like, is this really the best way to tell this story? And I'm not even like, I don't even want to approach it as like the plot hole angle of just like, I just don't think this is good storytelling. Like I don't like this storytelling, I guess, at this point, because I think all that stuff, like regardless of like audience, plot, how you're communicating, whatever, like it's corny, it's on the nose. It's also just like exhausting at this point, because through the prequels, through the Clone Wars, and all, the additional material, around it, the books, the comics, there has been so much foreshadowing of Anakin's future, like an exhausting amount of it. Like, you have your Phantom Menace poster of, Jake Lloyd standing there and like the shadow of Darth Vader behind him. Great poster. And then that has been hammered in for 20 years since then, of just like, hey, did you know that Anakin Skywalker is going to become Darth Vader? And it continues to be so. Like, we see all this exact same stuff in even like things as recent as Ahsoka, where it's like, oh, it's Anakin Skywalker, he's so good. Uh-oh, I think he has a bit of dark side in him. He's saying some stuff that's a little shady.
Yeah.
I hope nothing comes from that. But yeah. So I think like them just going so literal with all of that is just like, it's like eye rolling.
Yeah, I agree. And there was other issues with this one. Not to, be too critical or whatever, but like the second episode ends with the father being like, "You guys have to leave. Like, you must leave. Get on that ship and get off of Mortis before my son has access to that ship. Please leave. That is imperative." And then like 3 minutes into this episode, maybe not even, Anakin's like, "Obi-Wan, I can't leave Mortis without getting the approval of the father to leave." And I'm like, what? He was just screaming at you to leave. He was telling you, like, you have to leave. So, I mean, I understand it, because like Anakin's saying like, well, the father told me it's my job to be here because I'm the chosen one to hold Mortis in balance. And if I don't do that, people are going to suffer all over the place or whatever. But so I think it's just the dialogue maybe could have been written in a little bit different way, because I think that's the idea. The idea is I need to talk to him to see if it's really okay that I don't stay here as like the new Mortis god or whatever. But it just sounds like I got to go ask the dude if it's all right to leave. And I just got done watching him tell you, yes, you have to leave. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, and honestly, I think like that part is actually like a pretty good, more subtle Anakin character moment, because it is
Hmm.
like, he has these moments where he's like, that's ridiculous. I don't believe in this thing. And then like he gets so easily talked into things that, you know, like, because when he started this, he's like, no, the prophecy's ridiculous. Like, I don't believe any of that. Like, I just want to get out of here. I need to go fight this war. Like, that's what I should be doing. And then like he so quickly gets kind of manipulated into, like, suddenly this thing becomes his world.
Yeah.
Um in the same way like
Yeah.
Palpatine, manipulates him. So I think like that is kind of like a pretty good Anakin, story moment. And like it is subtle. Like it's not explicitly addressed. It's not like Obi-Wan doesn't say like, "Oh, that's Anakin." Hopefully, he don't no one
Yeah.
else ever manipulates him like that again.
Yeah, you're right. No, that's a good point. I like
So,
that. I don't know if I'd really thought about that. It's a good point. Yeah. Um, well, so they have this whole interaction, Anakin and the son. He sees this vision of his future, and then he basically is like, okay, cool. I guess I gotta join the dark side to not join the dark side, basically, or something, right?
yeah.
But like you said, he is easily manipulatable, and
Hmm.
or I don't know if that's even fair, but like we know that in the future he will be, consumed by a lie like that and end up,
Hmm.
um, believing the Jedi are traitors. That's like something he tells Obi-Wan, like before he throw or when he throws that speeder into the lava. He's like, I know that it's going to be the Jedi that will
Hmm.
betray the Republic, and his eyes are all evil looking and everything. Which really fast side note, in the Star Wars Archives book I was reading a couple weeks ago, the prequels one. Maybe I sent this to you guys. I don't remember, but uh, Hayden Christensen wanted to have the evil yellow contact lenses when he becomes like Darth Vader. Like I think
Hmm.
he gets them. When does he get them? Like after he goes and kills the younglings, or maybe right before he goes and kills the
It's
younglings,
when he
or
storms the temple,
the temple. Okay.
when he's rolling up
And George,
there. Yeah.
yeah, George at first was like, nah, that's too, like we're not doing that or whatever. And then like he ended up a couple days later being like, oh, you know what? I like it. Okay, we're gonna do it. So that was a Hayden Christensen idea. I think maybe
I
George planned on doing it like right at the end or something, but Hayden
Okay.
was like, nah, I think it should be
Cuz
early or
yeah,
whatever.
cuz
So
he turns like
yeah,
when he has the idea to like when he makes the plan to storm the temple. It's not after he does it that he
it's not
turns.
before. Yeah,
So,
he's already Darth Vader at that point, right?
yeah.
Yeah. I
So,
think the second
yeah.
I mean, he kneels down in front of, he kills Mace Windu and he kneels down in front of Palpatine. Like, that's it, right?
Yeah,
So,
that's the moment.
yeah,
Yeah. So I think from
yeah,
there on, yeah. Yeah, I agree.
yeah,
I agree with Hayden. Good call.
yeah. So, yeah, but anyway, he goes and tries to get back to the speeder so that the son can, they can leave together. Ahsoka disables it, and then there's this big, confrontation, right, where they go to, Obi-Wan goes to is it the temple? Whatever it's called, where they're not supposed to go, but Obi-Wan's like, well, we're doing it anyway. So they go there, and the kind of climax of the episode takes place. They're all together at this location. I think it's a well. That's what it's called. It's a well, some kind of
Mm.
well. So that's where the climax of the episode takes place, and yeah, basically everybody, uh, uh, the father decides in that moment that he's going to use the dagger. The son retrieves the dagger from the daughter's grave. The father, gets the dagger from him and decides he's going to use it to kill himself, because that will take all the power away from the son. And then actually kind of gives Anakin the look over his shoulder, like, go ahead and stab this dude with a lightsaber too. So,
Mhm.
the father dies, the son dies, the daughter's already dead. And so as a result of all of these Mortis gods dying, that brings balance back to Mortis.
Mhm.
I have issues with that a little bit. What do you think, Ryan?
Yes. Before we get to that, there's also, I mean, we kind of briefly mentioned it, but I think it's like really worth noticing and sitting with for a moment. Um, at the son shows Anakin all these visions, and then the father is like, "Yeah, you weren't supposed to see that, so I'm going to, use the little Men in Black pen thing and make you forget that you ever saw that."
Oh,
Which
that's true. Yeah.
um, is there a precedent for memory wipes in Star Wars at this point?
Not that I, well, for droids, for droids, of
For
course, but no, not, I
droids,
don't remember.
yes.
I could be wrong, but I don't remember anything like that.
Okay. Because obviously we get it in modern Star Wars. Like, it happens. Um,
Yeah.
but wow, who's this guy?
I was just gonna say, like, things, also
That's
things
it.
that people shouldn't see or be seeing or whatever. Um, this is I think Darth Bane. This is the Darth Bane. Apparently Darth Revan and Darth Bane were both going to be in this episode until late in the production, and so this is apparently the
What?
concept art for Darth Bane. Yeah. So,
Okay, that is not Darth
um,
Bane. Oh my goodness.
yeah,
What is
yeah.
happening there? Okay, you got to put that
Little
in the show
little
notes so
little
people
bonus
know.
for the little bonus for the viewers at home. Oh, do you want to see
Oh,
Darth Revan?
yeah.
Let's see
Yes,
Darth
I
Revan.
do.
Okay, hold on. Sorry, I kind of cut you off, but yeah, you're right. That's like a major thing. Like you shouldn't have seen all that. I do think that's important. Obviously, that's important, right? Like,
Yeah, you can't have
plot wise, like
Anakin going around
that would
knowing
be
that.
really awful if, yeah, there you go.
Okay, that looks
But
like
he already
Darth
existed in
Revan.
a video game, so they
Yeah,
already exist in a video game. Yeah, so that's yeah.
yeah.
But no, I mean Anakin. Like it would be terrible for Anakin to have known all this stuff at this point in
Hmm.
in the Clone Wars, like before Revenge of the Sith. That would be truly awful. So they had to come up with something like that if they were going to show
Yeah.
him this vision of his future. Yeah.
So that just like kind of goes back to the like why show him this vision of the future that's like not very well done, and then you have to have this like you write yourself into this like ridiculous plot contrivance as a result.
Yeah, but again,
Like,
again though, like I think that man, I'll just make it really fast because I
a
don't have
lot
a
of
lot of
time
time left
left.
here. But I think there's something to be said for viewing the storytelling in each medium as appropriate or unique to that medium and worrying
Hmm.
less about the impact on the larger story. So if I'm making a show for kids and I want them to understand what I want them to understand in that episode, being like, what would be the best way to do this in the context of this show, The Clone Wars, and like showing kids exactly what his future would be, maybe that's the best way to do it for this story. The problem is like when everything has to impact everything else and we view it as part of a larger thing, then it's like, well, maybe that's not the right way to do it. I agree. My preference 100% is like that vision should have been less specific and it didn't have to show him all those details, and then it would be okay. It would sit well within the rest of the story. But I think, it really is a question of like purpose and audience and intention. Like, am I
Hmm.
thinking about, if I'm the writer, am I thinking about, you know, when Disney buys Lucasfilm and everything becomes canon with a capital C, like how does this
Hmm.
impact everything? Or am I just thinking about what's going to be like that Saturday morning or that Friday night when kids are watching this episode? Like, what's the best way to deliver the story to that specific audience? Um, so that's the kind of conundrum we found ourselves in with Star Wars these days, I guess. And it is what it is. But yeah.
Yeah.
Um, okay, but let's talk because I am getting a little low on time here, and I want to talk about the
Hmm.
Ahsoka show stuff too. So,
Hmm.
just quickly, um, where are you at with the whole like everybody dies and that brings balance to Mortis thing? That's a problem.
Yeah, I don't love it. I mean, it's kind of like it's interesting in like a really like dark, like a black comedy sort of way. Like
Uh
I
huh.
think like it is like pretty like dark and ironic, and it feels like a story you would get in one of those like Halloween special Tales from Vader Castle um
Well,
stories, but like as you know, as it's kind of presented here, like it I don't think it's great.
I promise I'm not trying to be like a total jerk here or whatever, but like truly this is what it feels like to me. It feels like if you were watching the Terminator movies and the Terminator movies kept telling you over and over that like it's of the utmost importance that John Connor like survive because like he has to lead the resistance or whatever in the
Mm-hmm.
future. But then instead, like John Connor and like Sarah Connor and also like the T-800, they all die, and then the argument the movie makes is like, okay, cool, everything's fine now because all these key players died or whatever. It's like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but I just watched 3 episodes where you that like these episodes were telling us that
Mm-hmm.
the only way to keep the force in balance is for these 3 gods of Mortis to be there to keep it in balance. And then at the end, you're like, it's telling us, well, if they weren't there at all, it would be fine. Like, well,
Mm-hmm.
why, you know what I mean? Like this, I thought they had this critical, important role, and that's even more problematic to me because I think in the future, the idea is going to be that Ahsoka or Balin or somebody, or maybe a combination of people, are going to be back on Mortis fulfilling these important roles. But this arc ends with basically saying that doesn't matter. Like, you could, if they die, everything's cool.
Hmm.
Am I missing? Am I wrong about that? Or like,
No,
is that?
yeah, I like yeah, I mean it is no, I think you're justified in your belief, and I think like I don't like inherently have a problem with the story if it was like if this was all presented in a different way. If this was like presented as like here's a spooky cautionary tale,
Yeah.
like kind of thing, and then like then there's like this kind of twist at the end where everyone dies. It's like John Carpenter's The Thing, like well, we took care of the problem
Yeah.
because everyone's dead. Um, like, yeah, I think like it could work in that sense, but that's not the way it's presented here. So it does just it's almost like it's the same feeling as like the mind wipe,
Yeah.
basically, where it's um like why even bother like telling the story if you're just gonna like actually like here's this like you know Deus Ex Machina like plot
Yeah.
point that like just negates all the storytelling up to that point and has like no real impact. Like the
Well,
moment isn't that impactful to me, whereas like when this happens in like a horror movie or something, because it you know happens constantly where there's like this ironic like black comedy dark ending, whatever, and you're like left there like damn, like kind of thing. Like that's not how I felt at the end of this. I was like, oh, I guess it's like because you're like supposed to be kind of like sad that everyone died, and then like but you're also kind of wondering like what the hell is going on. Yeah, I don't know. I think like
well,
the
and the son is like
storytelling
the
just doesn't work.
personification of the dark side, but then he's really not that evil. Like it doesn't feel like, but I mean, I get that like with a normal person who is light and dark and all that, but I always
Mm-hmm.
struggle with this. I think my perspectives are too Western, and like I don't, I struggle with like balance as a concept, and like I don't know. I feel like I'm pretty bad at like all that, but because the father says, I think it's the father who's like, without, and maybe it's the son, but anyways, it's it's reiterated multiple times in this arc that you can't have balance and you can't have the force and you can't have life without light and dark. Like they both have to be there,
Mm-hmm.
which makes sense. But then it's like, okay, well, the daughter is light and she's always light, you know what I mean? But then the son is the dark side, but then like in the end, he's like sad about what
Hmm.
happens to his dad, and we do feel empathetic for him. And I understand that from a characterization perspective, but then but isn't the story telling us that he is like dark side personified? Because he doesn't really seem to be dark side personified. I guess it's just the role he has. Like the role is to represent the dark side, but like doesn't mean he doesn't have anything else going on within him. And in general, I guess a more
Hmm.
complex character is better, but still, it's just a little.
Mm, I don't think so in this case. Like,
Yeah, you
because
think
I
he should just
also
be
was
like straight up
like it was also like kind of silly to me when he was like when he goes to his sister's grave and is like, oh, I'm so sad about this. Like,
yeah,
but I mean, like, it's just like maybe like whatever, like he had a single-minded focus and that led him to the dark side, which happens to multiple characters in Star Wars, like fine. But I think the big problem with this, like, you have these characters that are supposed to be like a metaphor, but then you're also like characterizing them
yeah,
and like trying to like make them more complex while also like trying to explain the metaphor in like really logical ways, and that's where like all of this storytelling just kind of like crumbles for me in this. It's like are they a metaphor, or are they like these literal like godlike beings that have
yeah.
this like specific purpose? And like, okay, are they these godlike beings, or are they like characters we're supposed to empathize with?
Right.
Like, you
Yeah,
can't
and
have it like all ways.
yeah, and on that exact, and I'm running out of time, unfortunately, but on
Mm-hmm.
that exact point, you can't have it both ways, and I feel that is exactly the case. Like, this could be just a mystical, kind of fun, allegorical 3 arc story that at the end they wake up in the ship and it's like, well, probably it's some weird force vision, but really none of it was really real and whatever else. But then you
Mm-hmm.
can't have it both ways, as you said, and then spend the next 14 years or 13 years or whatever like threading all of this into really critical components of future Star Wars storytelling, which brings me to Ahsoka, which I do want to talk about for a minute here
Yeah,
before we
yeah,
wrap
yeah.
up. Ahsoka concludes with Balin, looking out at those statues on Peridia of the father and the son, and the daughter is next to him, but her head is missing. Which I feel like is not just I don't think it's just a coincidental, like, we should make
Yeah.
these things look like worn a little bit. So let's just lop the daughter's head off. I don't know
No.
how you read that, but I read that like Ahsoka's gonna take that place. You know what I mean? That's my
Mm,
interpretation of that symbolism there. I don't know, but in any case, it just Ahsoka the show ends with both setting up the idea that Mortis will be important to that show's next season or the story that show overall is going to tell, and also I think really further solidifying in a major way the importance of Mortis to the larger Star Wars story.
yeah, I think yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm like a pretty big fan of the Ahsoka show. Um
Yep.
and I kind of like I knew this was in there, and I kind of just hand waved it at the end cuz like that's not what that show was about to me. Um, it was not about like Mortis stuff and the origins of the Force and all of that. Like, I think that's like kind of interesting for like Balin's story, because he was kind of this ambiguous character. Like, does he actually care about like the Empire? Does he care about the Jedi Order? Does he care about the Sith? Um, or is he just trying to like figure things out, and he has like this different belief structure that like he thinks this Mortis stuff is important. He's a Mortis stan, and like I like that about his character. I like that his character was complex, but like I don't like actually really care about this part, and it's really sad too, because most likely he's not going to be in the next season. Like, I
I think
mean,
they're gonna recast him. That would be my guess. I think they'll recast him.
okay,
I mean, I don't know anything. You know, obviously I don't know anything, but I'm not even basing that on like any rumors or anything. It just to me it
yeah.
seems like such an important character that they would maybe have to recast him. But yeah, I don't know.
I mean, I was thinking maybe they would like put him in like a cloak or like a mask or something to
Yeah.
like represent like I'm yeah, I mean, you know how I feel about this. Please do not like deep fake him. Um
No, I think that would be
like
awful. That would be terrible.
yeah, please don't do
It's one
that.
thing with an actor
Um
who's living and still with us, or I don't know, whatever.
yeah.
But yeah, that would
Yeah.
be very bad. I think. Yeah, tasteless.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But so I don't know where it's going to go. I would say like that stuff is again, it wasn't like the best part of Ahsoka for me. It wasn't even really anything like I thought about. Like I was like, oh, haha, it's that.
yeah,
Um, but I don't know where they're going to take this story. But again, like it just kind of exists in Filoni's work as of right now.
yeah,
So it is just kind of like oh, it's Dave with his owls and wolves and mortises.
yeah.
Like classic Dave. Like
Yep.
it's fine, whatever.
All right, I'm gonna say my final piece. My final piece here. Two things, real
Okay.
quick. One, I think that Ahsoka. I will say uh, I think it's really they handled the mystical side of things in a more subtle way and a more ambiguous way and a more interesting way to me. Like she falls at the end of whatever episode that is, and then you see her face close up, and then it kind of like pans to the left, and there's like waves, and then all of a sudden she's like in the world between worlds,
Mm-hmm.
and just like where is she? How is she? How did that happen? Like, did she fall for an instant? And like, did all that happen in an instant? Did it happen
Mm-hmm.
over a long period of time? Like all that stuff. It was just more, I think, visually the way they transitioned and set up the questions and all of that was like definitely leveled up from what we got here in this Mortis arc. So I think that's good. I think it makes a ton of sense because Dave's been doing this a long time and has really kind of upped his game in a lot of ways. I feel like so that's cool and I think worth pointing out and appreciating.
Yeah.
And just the other thing I'll say, like my final piece on the Mortis arc or whatever, yeah, you know what? Coming back to it after 13, 14 years, I certainly had complaints and pointed out complaints or whatever. As a self-contained little 3-arc story, I think it's pretty compelling, pretty interesting, especially viewed through the context of being a cartoon and a children's show that aired on Cartoon Network and all that stuff. I think it's interesting. I think the way it tries to address some of the mythology of Star Wars and the Force and everything is pretty interesting. So it's cool. I think I just have some concerns, I guess, with the exponential kind of increased importance of all of it. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, this being the genesis of everything with Mortis and all that stuff, like there's some like real kind of like fundamental concerns or
Mm-hmm.
issues I have with the way this whole thing is created and set up and stuff in this 3-episode arc. Um, so yeah, I guess I'm just I feel like I would want it to be a little. I would want the origin of all this stuff to be a little more airtight, considering how important it has become going forward. But like I just said, I do feel like they're doing a better job with this kind of mystical stuff lately, like for per se in Ahsoka. So, maybe it doesn't really matter all that much, anyways. I guess how it started in the Clone Wars.
Yeah. I think like my final piece is again like these episodes are watchable. They're not hard or painful to watch. They kind of fly by. There's some silly visuals and ridiculousness that you can take or leave. But I'm a fan of like when Star Wars gets very weird, very big ideas. I like that about Star Wars. I just think in so many ways this was just a big miss execution wise.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap up the show there because I'm running out of time. It's Oscar Sunday. I got to get in as many Oscar movies as I can before the big ceremony tonight. So
Oh,
I'm
is that
off to the
today?
movie theater. Yeah, that's on tonight. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No Star Wars nominated though, so
Mm.
it is what it is.
Have
But
you
I'm sure
seen Poor
ILM.
Things? Is that it?
I have not seen it.
Is that
It is
movie
nominated.
nominated for Oscars? Okay.
Yes, it
It's
is.
really good.
Yeah, I haven't seen that yet. I wish that I could, but I don't think. I mean,
I,
I will,
I, I
but not
still
today.
think about it a lot.
Yeah.
It's seared into my brain.
Oh, okay,
But,
interesting.
for
I watched
better or
Anatomy
worse.
of a I watched Anatomy of a Fall last night.
Mm.
The night before we watched Perfect Days, which was really great.
Oh,
Set
yeah.
in Japan, Ryan.
Lindsay just watched that. I did not.
Yeah, really good. That was really good. The Past Lives, we watched a few weeks ago. That was really good. So yeah, a lot of really interesting Oscar
Is our
movies
boy
this
Adam
year.
Driver nominated for anything for Ferrari?
No, I don't believe so. No. Oh, well, he could be. I don't know. I'd have to look. But Ferrari is not nominated as a movie for anything, so I don't think
Sad.
so. Yeah, yeah.
I'm pro his Italian accent in that movie. I know it's potentially problematic, but
Yeah.
I liked it. I loved
Yeah.
his performance in that.
Yeah, and the second Italian heavyweight sort of like cultural figure that he's played in a biopic in the last 3 years or something? Because wasn't he also in the House of Versace?
Oh,
Wasn't that what it
yeah.
was called?
Yeah.
So he's found a niche. But I got to go. So thank
Yep.
you very much for listening. We'll be back soon with another episode of the Blockade Runner podcast. Until then, you can find everything we do at blockaderunnerpodcast.com. If you want to tell us what we're missing regarding the Mortis arc or why we're being a little too harsh on it or whatever, please feel free to email the show, blockaderunnerpodcast@gmail.com. Join our Discord, which I'll put a link for in the show notes, or follow us on Blue Sky. So, until next time, thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon with another episode of the Blockade Runner Podcast.